Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in Arise analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Thank you for joining us again.
Joining you? I have been here all along. Benga, good morning. And good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
How are you?
Great to see you this morning.
Good to see you too. I
Always
hope everyone is doing well.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's look at those stories that are shaping the agenda for you today. We'll kick off with this day newspaper. Today's front pages collectively paint a picture of a country grappling with security, governance, economic tension, and regional diplomacy. Lawmakers are probing their detention of that Nigerian military aircraft in Burkina Faso, underscoring fragile relations and insecurity in the Sahel. Courts and politicians are locked in disputes over federal authority and democratic norms, reflecting deepening political strain. Economic pages are dominated by regulatory battles in the oil and gas sector and budget plus more borrowing. Overall, the coverage suggests a nation balancing internal political pressures and economic reforms against persistent security challenges at home and abroad. Now, this day newspaper leads with budget news as it reports that the Senate has approved $60 oil benchmark, while crude oil falls to $59 per barrel for the medium-term expenditure framework. More on dispute in the energy sector as Dangote takes a step further by submitting a petition to the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission for the probe of Farouk Ahmed, who is the CEO of Nigerian Midstream and Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency, over $7 million school fees for his kids in Switzerland. On the window, Transcorp Hilton has named Awale Elumelu as board chair from January 1, 2026, and President Trump adds Nigeria to his travel restriction list as the number expands to 39. The Punch newspaper tells us the police is deploying special forces ahead of the Nigerian Labour Congress protest today. The NLC says, hey, Nigerians are suffering, we need to talk about it, and the government has to do something. Daily Independent reports on the Senate approving 54.46 trillion naira spending plan and 17.88 trillion naira in fresh borrowing. African Democratic Congress accuses the Supreme Court of creating constitutional tyrant in the president. And House of Representatives members probe the continued detention of Nigeria's aircraft and crew in Burkina Faso. Leadership newspaper this morning turns attention to Nigerian Bar Association kicking against resumption of tinted glass permit enforcement by the police. Also, former Chief Justice of the Federation, Tanko Mohammed, is dead. Tinubu, the Supreme Court, and others are mourning his passing. New Telegraph says Tinubu promises the new tax law heralds good news for the poor and low-income earners, as CBN revokes the licenses of 2 mortgage banks, Aso Savings and Union Homes. In other titles, while Dangote has been up in arms against Farouk Ahmed with allegations of corruption, the Daily Times this morning is reporting that Ahmed is now defending himself, that he has flatly denied this egregious accusation, claiming merit-based scholarships and family funds from his late father's education trust fund and legitimate savings are the avenues or channels through which he is funding his children's education. Daily Sun newspaper leads with Aisha Buhari claiming the cabal almost killed her late husband and former President Muhammadu Buhari. Vanguard newspaper shines a light on Nigeria Labour Congress, insisting that workers are facing the worst crisis in Nigeria's history. On to the international headlines. Let's pull up the Guardian newspaper. Top takeaways from today's front pages are 2 government moves: rejoining Erasmus education in Europe and a major revision of BBC funding. So the Guardian leads with Britain to rejoin the EU's Erasmus student exchange program from 2027. This is a politically symbolic shift that restores a popular student mobility scheme and eases UK-EU educational ties. The Times newspaper has also gone with that same piece, which restores funded study exchanges and reciprocal fee waivers. Daily Mail focuses on ministers outlining a BBC funding overhaul from 2028. This signals an imminent shake-up of the license fee model that could reduce costs for low-income households. And still on the BBC, Daily Telegraph reports on government consultations as it weighs advertising, subscriptions, and free licenses for benefit claimants as part of funding reforms. In Financial Times this morning, Mbappe wins a 60 million euro payout as Labour hails a sweeping workers' rights shift. Daily Mirror writes about Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC and the fact that the BBC has planned to fight it. Overall, there's global condemnation of Jimmy Lai's conviction in Hong Kong, pro-democracy media tycoon who has been found guilty of national security laws. And there are funerals and grief for Bondi Beach victims in Australia, while talks to bring to a close the Russia-Ukraine war continues. Now let's break down what these stories mean for everyday people. Returning to this day newspaper, Dangote and Farouk Ahmed. He petitioned the ICPC demanding arrest and investigation of the CEO of NMDPRA over corruption. Farouk is said to be living beyond his means as a public servant. He is accused of spending more than $7 million, which amounts to 7.5 billion naira, on his 4 children, paid upfront for schooling in Switzerland. Dangote further alleged that Farouk embezzled and diverted public funds. That, for someone who has worked his entire life in the public sector, he cannot honestly claim to be wealthy, meaning that he has corruptly enriched himself. Dangote really going dirty there against Farouk Ahmed.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that he is going dirty. I think he's just trying to be logical. At one point, we even heard that he had said his own children did not go to schools that were that expensive. I mean, come on, Switzerland schools are the elite of the elite. $7 million is not a joke. So, I mean, I think we're just seeing the start of what is going to be an even more messier battle. But let's not forget what the main issue is here. You know, the broader context is that the complaint of Dangote is NMDPRA's regulations, are not being favorable to local players, being Dangote himself. So, I mean, let's not forget that. So him pointing this out, even though the response has been that, okay, this is just a smear campaign, let's look at the broader context and keep focused on what the real problem is here.
Okay, I think as journalists, we have the responsibility of maintaining some level of restraint and caution so as not to fall into what in legal practice called subjudice. But when you look at the case on the surface, I think the burden of proof is on Dangote to actually prove that the money collected, the money used in sponsoring his children, that's if it's verified that indeed he's sponsoring his children in Switzerland school at the cost of $7 million a year, he has to prove that that money has a link with the public account of the NMDPRA. So the burden of proof is on him because the law is based on evidence. So he would have to prove that actually this is a case of stolen funds. Because one thing that you might also want to imagine in this case is that perhaps in the issuance of license, he might have compromised some integrity tests in the issuance of license to market importers of in the down and midstream sector. But when you look at this, well, the case is in court now. But you look at the role of the CEO Ahmed Farouk. When you look at the Section 32 of the of the Petroleum Industry Act that states that it empowers the NMDPRA to ensure public competition and private sector engagement, and to identify and investigate any dominant force in the course of the market change. So we are with the court hearing and pronouncement on this and the investigation into this matter without falling into the issue of sub judice.
I mean, first of all, it seems that Dangote has borrowed from his friend and fellow businessman, Mr. Femi Otedola, by pursuing corruption allegations against public officials or public servants, which has worked in the past. We remember the case of Otedola and Farouk Lawan in a House of Representatives, who was accused of collecting a bribe or demanding bribe from Mr. Otedola. He collected $500,000. Eventually, that buried his career. He was jailed. And the other day, by the way, President Tinubu pardoned him. It was among those that were pardoned. But what we see here is a campaign by Dangote to cripple what he views as vested interest in the energy sector, and particularly in relation to petrol because of his refinery. But critics will say that, on the other hand, yes, he's fighting vested interest, but hopefully he does not become the vested interest that he's fighting against and becomes like, you know, a monopoly and a monster, or his companies becoming monsters within that sector. So having said that, let's look at the bigger picture. In the grand scheme of things, this goes beyond Farouk Ahmed, because today it's Farouk Ahmed, tomorrow is somebody else. It is also a question of the lives of public servants and the issues of corruption. It hasn't been proven, you know, there will be a court case for him. He will have his day in court. But it talks about, you know, cases we've had in the past where civil servants live beyond their means. Civil servants that understand the system, game that same system and use it to corruptly enrich themselves and actually fight against change and frustrate reforms. Remember during President Olusegun Obasanjo, when he was doing the telecommunications reforms, you know, those in NITEL, their bosses and the staff really did not want that change, because that would put them out of business. So they were deploying every trick in the book, because they understood the system, in order to make sure those reforms did not go through. Right. At the end of the day, President Obasanjo was able to pull through. So it might be similar to what is happening today with Dangote and all of this, you know, because we know that this is a sector that needs to change. At the same time, Dangote is a businessman trying to recoup his investments. Some of the arguments are for the fact that there is still need to import petrol. So let's see how this plays out, but we can understand that there's public servants on the one hand, Dangote on the other hand, and us, the consumers, whom these policies will affect at the end of the day. Let's look at Daily Independent this morning. House of Representatives members probe the continued detention of Nigeria's aircraft and crew in Burkina Faso. This is really something that needs to be looked at, at the end of the day. There were conflicting reports about whether the crew had been released. Now we know they have not been released. And also conflicting reports about the true intention. Initially, it was said to be on routine mission to Portugal and needed to land. That has been punctured. Unconfirmed reports say there's more sinister mission going on. No, but the fact that this detention has lingered on perhaps suggests that there's more than meets the eye. And it also reflects that growing mistrust between Nigeria and that AES bloc, where heightened security paranoia and strained relations, mean aviation movements that used to happen between us before can no longer happen. And this is a problem for both them and us. And then finally, I think the incident also underscores the weakening of the ECOWAS free movement and cooperation, which suggests that West Africa's security fragmentation is going to affect everybody. And this is something that we definitely do not want to see. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yes, well, I'd like to disagree slightly with you, Dr. Constance, because I think that Burkina Faso is just standing its ground. It's within its rights to protect its sovereignty and make sure that, if you're not allowed to be in the airspace, then surely you should be held accountable for it. Now, one thing that I did like about this is that the Nigerian Air Force already came out and debunked all claims saying that this had nothing to do with foul play or espionage. So at least that's a good sign that they're, you know, speaking up. But where are these 11 personnel and this aircraft? Because the status of them is currently unknown. We don't know what is happening with them. There are no talks currently going on. So this move being initiated by the House of Reps is quite welcome. I know that regional voices have also spoken up and stated that a clear airspace violation is, is actually being in order right now. And so, as I said at the very beginning, it's within their right to make sure that, hey, if any violations are made, we are holding you accountable. So it's now for Nigeria to respond, to come forward and say, all right, we're clearing the air. Yes, they've debunked the espionage talk, they've debunked foul play, but let them also come and speak up about how these men are going to be released.
All right, let's quickly go to Daily Times.
I think there's something very important here, because it's something that borders on international relations. And I think that in international relations, you very well said, Yolanda, but in international relations, I think political realities are power realities. And when you look at the history of international relations, the issue of no-fly zone is a very, very much contentious area in international relations. Article 2, subsection 4 prohibits the use of force in safeguarding no-fly zone, except on 2 instances. That's one, when it is authorized by the United Nations itself, or when it is used as an individual or collective self-defense. In this case, that individual self-defense applies to the case of Burkina Faso. But now, in the overall use of it, when you will look at how it was being deployed in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1992, and also we have the issue of Iraq also, which is highly contentious. You could see that the Nigerian landing there does not constitute a threat to the political sovereignty, to the territorial integrity of Burkina Faso. So if we can prove that this is not, if this does not undermine in any way, or there is no espionage attached to it, or there is no security implication, if we can conveniently prove the true diplomatic instruments, then I think there is no sufficient reason. Otherwise, they will be relying on their capacity to deploy the use of force.
But Gbenga, the issue here is not a no-fly zone. The issue is that when you're flying to other countries, there's usually communication.
Yes.
Air communication about movement of aircraft.
And there are rules that govern
yes. If not, it would be
an emergency.
No, hold on. If not, even in an emergency, before you fly to other countries or fly over their airspace, there is communication. But there was nothing like that.
Yeah,
so, but the thing is that even before the emergency, you knew you were flying across airspaces. So I think it goes beyond just emergency. But the bigger issue here is that we already have friction with these countries. If there was no friction, maybe it would have been easier, because they're very suspicious of the French. They're very suspicious of Nigeria. And they've already broken away from the regional body. And so that is why this is taking more time to resolve. All right, let's look at the Daily Times. This morning, NBA says tinted glass policy is illegal. Extortionists and cite court action, seeks immediate halt once against harassment of motorists across the country. And so the NBA chairman gave a press conference yesterday, and his point was that a couple of things: the legality of the police acting as a revenue generating agency, that has no place in law. That they're trying to drive or to raise funds, and this should not be. Secondly, that payments are made to a private account and not a government account. Why is that the case? And then why should there be an annual renewal of this permit, which is a way of extorting people? And then finally, NBA says this is an affront on the authority of the court, which has restrained the police from the policy. I mean, do we have time? Very quickly, if you have something to say, very quickly.
When you look at it, I think it's a catch-22 situation, if you ask me. The NBA, they are jumping to accuse. They should have stopped at reminding the Nigerian police that this case has been heard in court and the court has reserved judgment, which is a flagrant disregard to court process. But now going ahead to declare it illegal, they should have also waited for the court pronouncements. Likewise, the police institution too, trying to enforce this thing as early as the second day of 2026 is also very disregarded. It's a flagrant disregard to court process. Like you said, it's not a revenue generating agency, and so we need to see, because one, this policy is hinged at the mint permit of the 1991, which was a military decree. So I think that the Nigerian police, once again, that is claiming to be a friend of the people, should exercise caution and let the rule of law prevail. This is a decent society. It's expected to be a decent society. And I think everyone should exercise calm and restraint.
Do you have your tint permit ready?
So,
you're putting me on the spot, Yolanda.
To the international headlines, President Trump sues the BBC for $10 billion on accusations of defamation over that Panorama speech edit.
Well, you know, the story has been coming out for a while now. In 2021, that's when Trump actually gave that speech that the BBC then turned into a documentary, but they edited it for its own suiting. Now, Trump is demanding $10 billion in compensation. I think this amount keeps going higher and higher the more that we report it, because I think when we first started speaking about it, it was $1 billion or about $5 billion or so, and it kept increasing with time. Now, one major legal hurdle that Trump is facing at the moment is the fact that this documentary was never officially aired in the US. It was only shown in other parts of the world and in the UK. So that's one hurdle that he may have to fight. But now the BBC is saying, look, we acknowledge what we have done, we apologize, but this does not amount to defamation. So, I mean, it's an unfolding story. We wait to see how it develops. Does this potentially weaken the claims of Trump, with the BBC saying that it is not defamation? We wait and see, and we'll definitely be keeping you updated.
Well, I mean, I think this is less about the likelihood of that payout and more about Trump using the courts as a political and strategic tool
as a power
to
move.
fight mainstream media that he always describes as fake news, you know, the CNN, the BBC and all of them. So he's also using it to rally his supporters around claims of persecution and send a broader warning to the international broadcasters that the cost of aggressive investigative journalism ahead of everything, you know, you will have to pay on that. So I think that's what he is basically doing. But it's an unfolding story, as you said. We'll see how this pans out. Those were your headlines for today.
Thank you, Dr. Constance. You're watching Daybreak.